वो जो एनबी नरीमान है ना, एनबी नरीमान रिटायरमेंट हाँ आ रहा
Everyone, whether the Chief Justice of India has arrived, may I request all of you to wear your mask and we'll be starting the program soon. Thank you so much. Honorable the Chief Justice of India, Honorable Justice R.F. Nariman, Honorable Judges of the Supreme Court, Shri K.K. Venugopal, who is with us virtually, Shri Tushar Mehta, Learned Solicitor General, all additional Solicitor Generals, our President Shri Vikas Singh, Vice President Shri Pradeep Rai, Shri Rahul Kaushik, Joint Secretary, Shri Minesh Kumar Dubey, Treasurer, Dr. Ritu Bharadwaj, Joint Treasurer, SCBA, Dr. Joseph Aristotle, Secretary SCORA, other office bearers of SCBA and SCORA, senior advocates, the Secretary General, Supreme Court and members of the registry, my fellow colleagues at the bar who are present with us physically, family members of Honorable Mr. Justice Nariman, and everyone watching us through our YouTube channel. The Nariman clan has produced two great warriors in the history of this court. One of them is the legendary Mr. Fali Sam Nariman, and the other is the reason why we have all assembled today, that is Honorable Mr. Justice Rohinton Fali Nariman. We have all gathered here to celebrate the more than 4-decade journey of Justice Nariman as a counsel, senior counsel, and then a judge of the Supreme Court. Justice Nariman is not just a scholar of law, but is a master of comparative constitutional law, an expert on comparative religion, and authority on Western classical music. It is not just the diversity of the man, but also the perfection in all branches of his expertise, which is unmatched. By the time I joined the bar, Justice Nariman had already distinguished himself as a senior counsel in this court. He also shared a very warm and cordial relationship with my own senior and mentor, late Soli Sorabji. In the corridors, when some of us heard a loud move from behind, we knew Justice Nariman was rushing to one court or the other, and we had to get out of the way. The trajectory of Justice Nariman's career is remarkable. He was designated at the young age of 37 in December 1993, served as Solicitor General of India between 2011 and 2013, and finally was elevated to the bench in July 2014, when he was at the peak of his practice, setting in motion a very healthy trend of elevating distinguished members of the Supreme Court to the bench. Justice Nariman has been involved in several path-breaking judgments of this court, either as counsel or as a judge. It wouldn't be inaccurate to say that in his thought and his judgments, Justice Nariman has been a great constitutionalist and an ever greater protector of civil liberties. His judgments evidence that he read the Constitution to be very liberal and pro-liberty. Justice Nariman is also to be credited to a large extent to make the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code work. I now request Mr. Vikas Singh, President SCBA, and Mr. Pradeep Kumar Rai, Vice President SCBA, to kindly escort Honorable Mr. Justice N.V. Ramana, Honorable the Chief Justice of India, and Honorable Mr. Justice Rohinton Nariman, Judge Supreme Court of India, to the dais. May I now request Mr. Mukesh Kumar Singh, Member Executive, to present a bouquet of flowers to Honorable the Chief Justice of India. May I now request Ms. Sasmita Tripathi, Member Executive, to present a bouquet of flowers to Honorable Mr. Justice Nariman. May I now request Dr. Ritu Bharadwaj, Joint Treasurer, SCBA, to present a bouquet of flowers to Mrs. Sanaya Nariman. Madam. As the Learned Attorney General is virtually present with us, may I request Mr. Prashant Singh, Member Executive, to present a bouquet of flowers to Mr. Tushar Mehta, Learned Solicitor General of India. May I now request Mr. Pradeep Kumar Rai, Senior Advocate and Vice President of SCBA, to kindly give his welcome address. Sir.
Honorable Justice N.V. Ramanna, Honorable Chief Justice of India, Honorable Judges, Supreme Court of India, Mr. Vikas Singh, President of SCBA, Mr. Ardendu Modi, Secretary SCBA, though virtually present Mr. Honorable Attorney General K.K. Benugopal, Mr. Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General of India, Mr. P.H. Parikh, six-time President of SCBA, Mr. Manoj Mishra, Vice President of ISPORA, and our entire executive committee. Today, after a tenure of 7 years, 1 month and 6 days, Honorable Justice Nariman is going to demit the office. Justice Nariman has been an extraordinary personality since the day he joined the bar. Prior to joining the bar, he was actually the son of none other than Mr. Faliyas Nariman and late Miss Bapsi Nariman. I welcome each one of you. Madam, sorry, Sanaya Nariman, ma'am is here. I did not mention your name. Mr. Nariman did his BCom from Sri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi. Thereafter, Mr. Nariman did LLB from Law Campus. He was classmate. Justice Naveen Sinha, he was also in the same class. So that he was the extraordinary student in the law faculty. All the classmates, they share the days when Honorable Justice Nariman was studying. They say that he used to appear in the exam and he was the first person to leave the examination hall. Though he stood first, he actually secured always top marks in the classes wherever he attended. Mr. Nariman also studied in Harvard Massachusetts Institute, and when he started practicing here, Mr. Parikh recalls those days when Mr. Nariman joined the bar. He was given priority over many of senior advocates, and AORs used to brief him. Such a wonderful personality. When I joined this bar, Mr. Nariman was already a senior advocate. First matter I did with him, that was cricketers Anil Kumble matter, and many matters. I had an opportunity to brief him in one of the Noida Authority matter, in which he scolded all of us, the clients and us, and we thought that what kind of first interaction was that, and I thought what kind of person he is. But next day, when the matter was called, we got a favorable order, and then he offered all of us a cup of coffee, and we were actually, that was his nature. So all of us, they were very familiar with him in that nature. Narayan was there, that he always come to rescue us, who was the clerk of Honorable Justice Nariman. He was more friendly to us, and whenever we visited the house of Mr. Nariman, he always welcomed us with a cup of coffee, thanks to Madam Sanaya Nariman. The classmates of Mr. Nariman, one is Neera Gupta. She says that he was an extraordinary student. He was very witty, and whenever he used to come in the classroom, his friend, in all the friends, their daughter could resemble that Mr. Nariman is present there. Another friend of his is Sumit Kachwa, who was his classmate. I spoke to him yesterday. He told that Nariman was such a generous person that at those days he was the only student who had a car in the class. So when during the examination time, the lift was very important, and he used to pick all the classmates, at least 6 and 7 of them, and he used to drop them at their houses. That was so generous, because during the time of examination, there was only 2 days gap in each paper. So those days, dropping them and each one of them, and that was really very great about him. Actually, many occasions are there. Justice Nariman was designated senior advocate at the age of 37 by none other than Justice M.N. Venkat Chalaya, who is the father figure of our Supreme Court, and I had some very good interactions with him. I recall one incident when there was a lathi charge on Varanasi Students Union leaders, And I had written a letter to him. Justice Venkat Chalaya called me those days. I was a young student. I was doing my master's. He called me and he said that I don't know you, but you have written this letter. You do one thing, you approach Mr. Nariman and you take my name. But fortunately, he himself, suo moto, taken up that matter and he visited Varanasi, so there was no need to engage him. So that kind of respect and things was there with those honorable judges. Not only this, when even this tenure as a judge, when Justice Nariman was actually became the judge of the Supreme Court, we were a bit apprehensive that how he will actually handle this situation, because transformation was actually, in my opinion, it was difficult. But we all were proven wrong. He performed extraordinarily. And there is a story that when this originally the Parsi community came to Gujarat, the king of Kathiawar, Mr. Rana, he asked them that we don't have any place in our kingdom. So he just sent a full glass of a bowl of milk to show that there is no place. The priest of Parsi community added some sugar into it and he showed that we will just mix like that. And that actually Mr. Nariman performed in Supreme Court. He attended everyone. Recently we had a meeting of Chamber Committee at the residence of Honorable Justice Nariman, in which Justice Lalit and Honorable Justice Nageshwar Rao were also present. That was very fruitful meeting. He called registrar for the chambers and he said that whatever the bar is saying, you have to listen, that we have to decide. We are thankful to this chamber committee that they decided that whatever the bar says, that will be our final decision. Honorable Justice Nariman had appeared in several cases. I don't recall that there are any matter in which they were not engaged. Mostly Justice Lalit, Justice Nariman, Justice Mr. Salve, and these are the top lawyers, Honorable Justice Nageshwar Rao. And one more credit to Honorable Justice Nariman, that he persuaded Honorable Justice Nageshwar Rao to join the bench when he was not willing to join. That is our information. I don't know how far it is correct, but that also goes to his credit that he took away one of the favorable seniors of ours and he took them to Supreme Court. Honorable Justice Nariman delivered several landmark judgments. One is Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India, in which the constitutionality of section 377 IPC and gay sex was under question, and he said that set the course of future. The bench attempted to right a wrong by the history, and he unanimously holding section 377 IPC unconstitutional. In the another matter, Joseph Sain versus Union of India, the 5 judges bench, including Justice Nariman, had pronounced the decision unanimously on validity of section 497 IPC, which brought adultery in box of criminalization, bench observing that any system treating a woman with indignity, iniquity and inequality or discrimination invites the wrath of the Constitution, and held that section 497 IPC and section 198 subsection 2 CRPC to be violative of article 14, 15 and 15(1) and 21 of an ultra virus of the Constitution of India. In another matter, General Singh versus Lakshmi Narayan Gupta, in which Honorable Justice Nariman delivered the verdict in which the reservation in the promotion case, in which there was a creamy layer concept of scheduled caste community, that also where he also hold that he also not only struck down the backwardness of criteria but also introduced principle of creamy layer exclusion. It held that creamy layer exclusion extend to SC/STs and hence the state cannot grant reservation in promotion. Indian Young Lawyers Association versus State of Kerala, in which a 5 judges bench by majority of 4-1 held not allowing entry to women of the age group of 10 to 50 years in Sabarimala temple. That also he held unconstitutional. The majority of other matters, Saira Bano versus Union of India, the majority of 3 judges including Mr. Nariman out of 5 judges bench of Supreme Court have held that practice of triple talaq is unconstitutional and violative of article 14 and 15 of Constitution of India. The one major contribution of Justice Nariman was the Indira Jaising versus Supreme Court of India, in which he laid the guideline for the designation of senior advocate. He said the sole yardstick by which we propose to introduce a set of guidelines to govern the matter is the need of maximum objectivity and process, so as to ensure that it is only and only the most deserving and very best who would be bestowed the honor and dignity. So in that way, he actually framed the guideline by which now all the high courts are designating senior advocates. Earlier, it was a kind of a practice where the honorable judges used to decide, and they used to appoint designate senior advocates. In another matter, Ram Vijay Singh versus State of UP, a three-judge bench headed by Justice Nariman held that plea of juvenility can be raised at any stage, even after finality of proceedings before the court. As a convention of the sitting judge of Supreme Court of India, the judge of court number 2, they heads the Nalsa. Honorable Justice Nariman did not accept that responsibility on the ground that he will not have enough time to contribute, and that responsibility went to Honorable Justice Nariman, Honorable Justice Uday Lalit. Earlier, this position was held by Honorable Justice N.B. Ramanna, who, for a substantial period, who did exemplary work during his tenure. When he assumed the role of Chief Justice of India, the post was then offered to Honorable Justice Nariman. Recently, this opportunity, we had to visit various other campuses where this state legal services authority is working completely as per guidelines of and guidance of Honorable Justice Ramanna and Honorable Justice Uday Lalit. It is a, Madam Nariman, it is a common belief that most of the husbands are controlled by wives. But when it is a story of a Parsi family, then there is no doubt. This is what most of them tell to me. Mr. Parikh may bring more light to it. Ma'am, now Honorable Justice Nariman is in your hand. I don't know how he is going to behave, but whenever he is behaving which is not appropriate, you may complain to us. Bar will come to your rescue. We wish Honorable Justice Nariman all the very best for his future endeavors. We all believe that he will start a new inning after demitting this office, but he will have the same recognition, respect and command with his future assignments also. He is an extraordinary person, extraordinary judge, extraordinary lawyer. He is 5 in 1. So we all are going to miss you, sir, but we will be in touch. And thank you so much for...
Thank you, sir. I request the technical staff to kindly stream the video message of the learned Attorney General for India on the projector. Side with it.
Honorable Justice Rohinton Nariman, Honorable Justice.
At that time a senior advocate practicing before the Supreme Court, became the 4th lawyer to be sworn in as a judge of the Supreme Court on 7 July 2014. But Justice Rohinton was not just a lawyer. On the other hand, during his term as a judge of the Supreme Court, nor was he just a judge. He is a priest, having been ordained at the young age of 12 and recites an entire Parsi holy book, the Avesta, from memory. He is a jurist par excellence, an expert in constitutional law, commercial and tax law, a religious scholar, having made an in-depth study of the Quran and the Bible, and although he calls himself a student of comparative religion, He is himself an authority on the religions of the world. He is an author of 2 books on Zoroastrianism and a 3rd book in the offing. An ardent lover of Western classical music, I have listened to his wonderful music system and enjoyed the Western classics which he plays. And a student also of history and philosophy and a polymath in the truest sense of the word. My sense of pride lies in the fact that Justice Nariman was my chamber junior. I have had very eminent juniors who have attained high positions in life, including Justice Murugesan, who retired as Chief Justice of the Delhi High Court, 2 union ministers, and several celebrated senior advocates. But the star among them all is Justice Rohinton. Not merely because he was elevated to the Supreme Court, but for the judgments that he has delivered, which have contributed significantly to the development of jurisprudence in the country. Even as a young lawyer, one could gather that Justice Rohinton was a multi-potentiality with diverse interests and expertise. He had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and dazzled his audiences with his punditry. His greatness as a scholar and as a jurist is in part due to his insatiable desire for knowledge, which has ensured that he remains a lifelong student, irrespective of his high stature or position. Justice Rohinton was designated as a senior advocate by the Supreme Court when he was just 37 years. As a lawyer, he has, I am told, over 500 reported Supreme Court judgments to his credit. But it's during the period of 7 years as a judge of the Supreme Court that he has made an immense contribution to Indian jurisprudence by authoring over 300 judgments and being part of the bench, delivering over 1,370 judgments. Periodic challenges were being made to the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code as a whole, or to different provisions in the code. It was Justice Rohinton who steered the code to all the impediments placed in its path so that it would fulfill its objectives of promoting entrepreneurship, supporting credit markets, and facilitating investments, leading to higher economic growth and development for our country. He put at rest the challenges to the IBC through highly enlightened judgments, pointing out the true significance of the IBC and the objectives which it sought to achieve. As a result of his judgments, the IBC now stands on a solid and unshakable foundation. One can also clearly distill from his decisions a rights-based and humanitarian approach. Justice Rohinton has held that the right to privacy is protected as an intrinsic part of the right to life under Article 21. In Puttaswamy, he held that Section 377 of the IPC in Puttaswamy and held in Navjot Singh Johhar's case that Section 377 of the IPC is unconstitutional insofar as it penalizes consensual acts between homosexual adults in private life, and struck down Section 497 of the IPC, which criminalized adultery in Josephshire. He held that the practice of triple talaq does not pass constitutional muster, and held that the prohibition on women in the age group of 10 to 50 years in the Sabarimala temple case is unconstitutional, and struck down Section 66A of the Information Technology Act as violating freedom of speech and expression. In Navjot Singh Johar, Justice Rohinton expounded on fundamental rights, responding to the argument that the court must not indulge in taking upon itself the guardianship of changing societal mores in the following words: these fundamental rights do not depend upon the outcome of elections, and it's not left to majoritarian governments to prescribe what shall be orthodox in matters concerning social morality. The fundamental rights chapter is like the North Star in the universe of constitutionalism in India. Constitutional morality always trumps any imposition of a particular view of social morality by shifting and different majoritarian regimes. While exercising suo jurisdiction on taking note of an alarming news report in view of the COVID-19 situation on the Kanwar Yatra in Uttar Pradesh and the Bakrid celebrations in Kerala, Justice Rohinton had in relation to the right to life and health observed that, quote, pressure groups of all kinds, religions or otherwise, cannot in any manner interfere with this most precious fundamental right of all the citizens of India. Taking note of the numerous allegations of improper arrest and treatment meted out to those arrested and brought to police stations, he has issued directions that CCTV cameras are to be installed in all police stations across the country, as well as in all agencies where interrogation and holding of accused take place. His judgment in Tufan Singh, holding that officers appointed under the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985 are police officers, and therefore confessional statements recorded by them under Section 67 of the Act are not admissible, is a progressive decision protecting the constitutionally guaranteed rights of accused persons. More recently, and in at least 3 matters where I had appeared, Justice Rohinton strike down in Tarachand Shah's case, Section 45(1) of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, dealing with bail as violating the right to life and personal liberty. In that very judgment, the judge issued a general direction to the courts in India to take up the thousands of cases of under trials who have been languishing in prisons without getting bail just because they did not satisfy Section 45(1) of the PMLA Act. He also struck down in Rajendra Shah's case a constitutional amendment inserting Part 9B into the Constitution so far as it applied to intrastate cooperative societies on the ground that the amendment was not ratified by a majority of the states. And in the Hindustan Construction, Justice Rohinton struck down Section 87 of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, holding that its retrospective effect was manifestly arbitrary. Justice Rohinton's judgments are unique because they are themselves authoritative source of information on the subject involved. One will find that all his judgments, containing an elaborate discussion on the law and decisions in other jurisdictions as well, as some history of the subject matter, is founded in religious and historical tests. The judge has strived to clarify the legal position by expounding the entire law on the subject of the particular act in question. His efforts have ensured clarity and certainty in the law for a long time to come. The arbitration committee in particular is grateful for Justice Rohinton's decisions in this area of law. Justice Rohinton is one of the greatest legal minds and one of the finest judges that the Supreme Court of India has ever had. A man of high integrity, he is highly respected and much loved by members of the legal fraternity. One will surely miss his stentorian voice in the courtrooms of the Supreme Court. But if you go for a walk in the late evenings in Lodi Garden, you might just hear the trademark voice as he walks with his wife Sanaya. I have no doubt that for Justice Rohinton, retirement means the start of many projects. I look forward to seeing him and hearing his views on diverse public platforms, disseminating all his knowledge, and to read the many books that he will surely write. I cannot wish him a well-earned rest, for surely he will now immerse himself in exploring new areas of creative work and producing books on subjects close to his heart. As described by an article published today, he is truly, quote, a constitutional czar par excellence, unquote. I wish Mrs. Rohinton good health, long life, and contentment in life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Though we miss your physical presence here, we thank you for taking such pains to send us your message. May I now request Mr. Vikas Singh, Senior Advocate and President SCBA, to kindly deliver his address.
My Lord the Chief Justice of India, Justice Nariman, Honorable Judges of the Supreme Court, Dr. Sanaya Nariman, Neena and Khurshid, daughters of Justice Nariman, the learned Solicitor General who's present here, the learned Attorney General who just we heard virtually, members of SCORA, members of the Executive Committee of the SCBA, members of the Bar, and ladies and gentlemen. Today we have assembled to bid farewell to Justice Nariman. Justice Nariman, his retirement evokes very mixed feelings in me. In my tenure, it's my privilege that I am hosting this event today for his retirement. But it's also my loss as the President of the Bar and on behalf of the entire SCBA that we are losing a brilliant judge. He, like all other senior advocates, made his name and fame in this institution. But he, unlike the others, repaid that debt by accepting the office of becoming a judge of the Supreme Court. I remember Justice Nariman as a lawyer, and I can share one secret with all of you, that his one day earning, a good day earning, would be more than what Justice Nariman would earn salary in these entire 7 years. So that's the sacrifice that Justice Nariman made by becoming a judge. I remember in 1993 when Justice Venkatachalaya was retiring, according to me, he was another intellectual giant and person with huge amount of integrity. In these lawns, when Justice Venkatachalaya came down from this dais and was meeting the lawyers, I felt so humbled that I touched his feet. Today, I get the same feeling of respect and awe for Justice Nariman. When he became a judge, the junior lawyers were very fearful that the way he used to, sort of scold them during a conference, lawyers felt that if he goes to the bench, how will he behave? I mean, he'll be very rough with the bar. That was the apprehension that the general bar had when he was elevated. But what a transformation! Justice Nariman was no more the same of what people had faced him in a briefing. He was a completely reformed man. He was nice to the younger members of the bar. He had invariably read the brief more than the lawyer arguing in front of him, but he never made that lawyer feel that he doesn't know his own case. Many a times, lawyers have got relief on a point which they didn't know that it existed in their favor. That's the greatness of the man. That's the thoroughness in which he used to read his briefs and come to court. I think a fitting tribute to Justice Nariman would be, and I'll beseech the Honorable CJI and the judges in the Collegium to ensure that all the judges that he wanted to appoint during his last few days should be elevated to the bar and brought here to the Supreme Court. That, according to me, will be the most befitting tribute to Justice Nariman. We, the members of the Supreme Court bar, have been facing a lot of problem of elevation, and I will beseech the Honorable CJI to try and look for somebody who can fill the void which is created by the retirement of Justice Nariman. Although it's very difficult for me to think of anybody who can fit that shoe, but nevertheless, attempt should be made and somebody from the bar should immediately be made a judge of the Supreme Court to fill up the vacancy caused by Justice Nariman's retirement. Elevation of Supreme Court lawyers has always been a vexed issue, and we feel that we need to be considered as a matter of right. I am extremely grateful to the Honorable Chief Justice of India for taking a huge step in that direction and ensuring that we are considered by the various courts. The Supreme Court Bar Association, in furtherance of the initiative taken by the Honorable Chief Justice of India, had constituted a search committee, and the search committee has also discussed names on 6 dates. And now we expect the Honorable Chief Justice of India to please see to it that a lot of us who deserve, I don't want anybody who's not deserving to be appointed, but a lot of us who deserve should be given an equal consideration by the High Court collegiums for the purpose of elevation. Justice Nariman, a man with countless feathers in his hat, a zealous lawyer, eminent judge, passionate historian, enlightening author, and a devoted priest. He is an embodiment of the eternal flame of wisdom. Born on 13th August 1956, he is the son of Fali Nariman, a distinguished Indian jurist, and Bapsi Nariman. Justice Nariman received his early education at the Cathedral and John Connon School in Mumbai. After completing BCom from Sri Ram College of Commerce, he pursued law from the Campus Law Center, and he joined the bar in the year 1979. The cultivated man that he is, Justice Nariman has his discipline and the constant pursuit of excellence from his mother. She was the driving force behind him. Being ordained as a priest at the tender age of 12, for him to go to the Harvard School of Law for his LLM in the year 1980-81, where he wrote his thesis on affirmative action, a comparison between Indian and US constitutional law. After this, he practiced maritime law in New York at Haight, Gardner, Poor and Havens for a year before returning to India. In 2011, Justice Nariman was appointed as Solicitor General of India at the age of 55. Justice Nariman had an illustrious career as a senior advocate and had been a part of various landmark judgments. On 7th July 2014, Justice Nariman was elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court and was the 5th Supreme Court judge to be elevated directly from the bar. Justice Nariman's legal acumen, brilliance and thoughtfulness makes him popular amongst the members of the bar and bench. Though he would invariably be more prepared than the arguing counsel, he never behaved in a manner. His elevation has been a matter of pride, especially for the youngsters practicing in this court. He would always encourage younger lawyers who argued cases before him, a trait which he learned from arguing before geniuses like Justice Chinnappa Reddy and Justice A.P. Sen, who would listen patiently to a young advocate, encourage him by putting meaty questions politely, and appreciate him openly. Incidentally, Justice Venkat Chalaya was the same judge who, as Chief Justice of India, changed the rule for considering Justice Nariman for being designated as a senior at the age of 37, because by till that time, the rule was that only people above 45 were considered for the purpose of senior designation. Justice Nariman, as an ordained priest, is adept at performing marriages and the Navjot ceremony. When a child belonging to the Zoroastrian family is initiated, he also had access to enter the sanctum sanctorum like any other priest from his community. He has also memorized 72 chapters of the Zend-Avesta, a holy book of the Parsis, and prayers in ancient Iranian language called Avestan. Interestingly, Justice Nariman started studying different religions like Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Christianity, in order to inculcate a deeper understanding of the pursuit of life on earth, and thus became an expert in comparative religion. Justice Nariman can also understand Rig Vedic Sanskrit. Justice Nariman is a devoted family man. The first book authored by Justice Nariman was The Inner Fire, Faith, Choice and Modern Day Living in Zoroastrianism, which was dedicated to his beloved grandparents, especially his grandmother, Banu Nariman, whom he was very close to. This book is the first of its kind and is complete analysis of 238 verses of the Gathas, the sacred text of the Zoroastrian faith, which is timeless and universal in its approach. His second book, Discordant Notes, The Voice of Dissent in the Court of the Last Resort, is dedicated to his beloved uncles Adi Nariman and Dr. Soli Contractor, who were his mentors and best friends as long as they lived. Justice Nariman dissects the dissenting judgments in the history of Supreme Court and has described the great dissenters as persons who had chiseled and added meaning to the Constitution's fundamental rights. They did this, according to him, by appealing to what the former Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court, Charles Evans Hughes, had called the brooding spirit of law and the intelligence of a future day. And many of those judgments, as we all know, have actually come to be overturned in view of the dissenting opinion. Recently, while delivering the 26th Sunanda Bhandare Memorial Lecture on great women of history, Justice Nariman said, in India, we have had a woman president, a woman prime minister. We have never had a woman chief justice of India. He expressed hope that the time for the first woman chief justice of India should not be very far off. And in line with the same point, I would beseech the Honorable Chief Justice of India that like you have a certain quota for the promotee judges, you should also have a quota for women lawyers, because that's the only way you can ensure that women are definitely appointed to the institution. And that's the only way more and more women will come into this profession and will adorn the higher courts. Justice Nariman has penned numerous judgments that marked a watershed in the evolution of Indian jurisprudence. When we talk of judgments and we talk of numbers, it will be trivializing the judgments written by Justice Nariman by counting numbers. It's the quality of the judgment which is important. It's the nature of subjects that he dealt with is important. The diversity of subjects that he dealt in his judgments is important. And that is the real contribution to jurisprudence that Justice Nariman has done in his 7 years tenure as a judge of the Supreme Court. In fact, I feel that in the time since he became a lawyer, in 79 or probably 81 since he started practicing in this court, probably since 81 till date, he would be there in all major judgments either as a lawyer or as a judge. And having most of the time, even as a judge, authored a separate opinion, which is always worth reading and which will add to the jurisprudence of this country. Justice Nariman has set up the Supreme Court Lawyers Welfare Trust, which works for the welfare of lawyers and encourages young talent. Justice Nariman is passionate about his work as justice, as the learned Attorney General very fondly mentioned. He's extremely fond of food, which of course you can see all over him. He's very good at tinkering with his hands. So if there is a radio not working at home, Justice Nariman, while tinkering on the radio, will be able to make it work. That's the talent that he has in his hand without being an engineer. He loves to travel and is good at directions and is fondly called the bagpiper in the family. He's fond of cricket and tennis, and he will remember scores of when Bradman hit his 10th century or when he did his 7th century and which match was that, etc. That's the kind of elephantine memory he uses not only for law but also for his passions. In his free time, he watches old classic movies and documentaries on history. The individual contribution of judges is absorbed in the anonymity by which the judicial process shapes law. In the course of a century, the acclaim of a bare handful survives their duty. Justice Nariman joins this most select company. Justice Nariman's legacy will continue to inspire generations of judges and lawyers for years to come. His term as a judge of the Apex Court shall be etched in the history of Indian jurisprudence. We wish, before wishing Justice Nariman, I have just one last request to make to the Honorable Chief Justice of India. We've all had to suffer this because of the auditorium not being made available to us. I would request the Chief Justice of India to ensure that we have the auditorium for all Supreme Court functions so that we don't have to bear this heat in this. And also sometimes we have the rains. I remember when Justice Indu Malhotra was doing her farewell speech here, it started raining and we had only one umbrella, so we could just, because she was the most important person on that day, So we could just provide her with that umbrella, and the rest of the dignitaries, including Justice Nariman himself, had to brave the rains and falling on their heads. So this is one last request I would make to the Honorable Chief Justice of India on behalf of the bar. We wish Justice Nariman a long, happy and fulfilling life beyond the bench, and may the choicest blessings of the Almighty be showered on you for a glorious and blessed life ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Honorable the Chief Justice of India to kindly address this gathering.
Brother Justice Rohinton Nariman and members of his family, Honorable Sister and Brother Judges, Attorney General and Attorney General, Mr. Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General, Mr. Vikas Singh, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Mr. Pradeep Kumar Rai, Vice President, Mr. A.K. Prasad, Secretary, Supreme Court Bar Association, senior advocates, law officers, members of the bar, media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Vikas Singh knows several secrets of judges, which we don't know about ourselves. So it is very dangerous. And Mr. Vikas Singh takes always an opportunity of any meeting, whatever it may be, putting before us the demands. I can say only one word, that is, I noted down his demands. After pandemic, more than 2 years, I think first time we are interacting and meeting, and of course, half faces only we are seeing, not full faces. And it's good. I hope by next meeting we will take out these masks also. And I want to give a extempore lecture, but better it is always taking into consideration of the constraints. Better I must go to my prepared text. Mr. Dave is laughing, I know. Let me start this farewell speech by pointing out an event in Brother Nariman's life, which I think it reflects of his journey of excellence. At the tender age of 12 years, while other children were probably playing cricket and other games, Brother Nariman became an ordinant priest of Parsi faith. This extraordinary grooming explains the evolution of his ethic, commitment, focus, and brilliance. Justice Nariman's illustrious career needs no introduction. However, on this occasion, I might be forgiven for a brief recall of his background. He was born on August 13th, 1956, to the legendary Fali S. Nariman and the late Mr. Pepsi Nariman. It is often said that no other plant can flourish under a banyan tree. However, this was not the case. It comes to Brother Nariman. He has always charted his own path and excelled in his chosen field, become a mighty banyan tree in his own right. Brother Nariman's excellence at law received recognition when he was made a senior counsel at the Supreme Court Bar at a young age of 37 years by the then Chief Justice of India, Justice Venkatachalaya. He was also appointed as Solicitor General in July 2011. He held the position for 1.5 years, and before his resignation, it is no surprise, he was the fifth counsel to be elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court of India directly from the bar on July 7, 2014. The impact of certain people's contribution to the judicial institutions cannot be measured in scales. That is the reason why I am not going to elaborately discuss Brother Nariman's pronouncements or judgments. All of you are already known his scholarship, acumen, knowledge, and understanding. He has given around 350 judgments as judge of this court and disposed of nearly 13,565 cases. He was left an indelible mark on the jurisprudence of the country. Apart from the contributions on judicial side, Brother Nariman has also contributed significantly as a member of various committees in the Supreme Court. Everyone here is aware that he was the force behind the creation of the Supreme Court Advocates Welfare Fund. At this juncture, I would like to highlight a few things that are not known to the public at large. The first relates to the number of sacrifices one must make when to decide to become a judge. The most obvious sacrifice is monetary, particularly when you are Brother Nariman with a roaring practice. One must be moved by spirit of public duty to take such a decision. The second aspect relates to the reduced role in society one must accept when becoming a judge. I have already made my view clear on this issue. I am not one who believe that judges should completely seclude themselves, as I think that it is important to stay in touch with the society and the profession even as a judge. However, the undeniable fact is that our engagement with society undergoes a drastic change once we take up judgeship. The third point I would like to flag relates to the amount of work we put as judges. Day in and out, there exists a misconception in the minds of the people that judges stay in a big bungalows, work only 10 to 4 in the day, enjoy their holidays. Such a narrative is untrue. It is not easy to prepare for more than 100 cases every week, listen to novel arguments, to independent research and other judgments, while also dealing with the various administrative duties of a judge, particularly of a senior judge. We either burn the midnight oil or wake up before sunrise, or sometimes even both, to fulfill our judicial duties. We continue to work even during the court holidays, do research and other pending judgments. Therefore, when false narratives are created about the supposed easy life led by judges, it is difficult to swallow. We cannot defend ourselves. It is the duty of the bar to refute these false narratives and to educate the public about the work put by in judges with the limited resources given to them. Honestly, if Brother Nariman had continued to be a lawyer rather than becoming a judge, he would have led a more luxurious and relaxed life. That he managed to balance all these duties and produce the quality of work he did is a testament to his work ethic and his capabilities. I hope the picture I have painted of being judge does not deter anyone from taking up a judgeship. The reward is in the feeling that we judges get every day in court in upholding the law and the noble values enshrined in the charter that we, the people of India, give ourselves 71 years back. Brother Nariman, expertise in the law should not overshadow the fact that he is a well-versed in variety of different topics. I have already talked about the fact that he is a priest of Parsi faith and he has immense knowledge when he comes to religious matters. He published a book on the topic in 2016 when he was a sitting judge of this court and has given many lectures in the field. I heard him during the L.M. Singhvi Memorial Lecture in 2019 when he spoke about reincarnation from a comparative religious perspectives. I was very much impressed with his oratory skills and his vast knowledge. I must also state Brother Nariman is a great lover of Western classic music and has lectured even on this topic. It is rare to find those who stand by these principles. Brother Nariman is one of them. I mentioned during my reference earlier today that Brother Nariman's retirement, I feel like I am losing one of the lions that guarded the judicial institution. Our loss will be a huge gain elsewhere. I am sure that gain will continue to be for the larger public good. I wish him all the best all his future endeavors. Madam Sanaya Nariman, stellar support to Brother Nariman needs to be recalled on this occasion. Let me wish Brother Nariman and all his family members the best of health and happiness. Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Your Lordship. Now may I request Honorable Mr. Justice Rohinton Nariman to kindly deliver it.
Honorable Chief Justice of India, brother and sister judges, my beloved Guru, the learned Attorney General, Sri K.K. Venugopal, Sri Tushar Mehta, other law officers, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Secretary, ladies and gentlemen. It is with mixed feelings that I leave this fantastic institution. The first feeling is one of enormous relief. I will not have the usual pile of briefs at 6 a.m. awaiting me. I will still wake up at 6 a.m. by force of habit, but for the first time will be able to do what an ordinary citizen does. I have belonged to this institution now for I don't know how many years. I came here in 1979. Those were fantastic days. I still remember we had outstanding judges, and as young people at the bar, we used to go and sit in Justice Krishna Iyer's court more than anybody else's. He had sparkling eyes. He was a genius. And he was unfailingly courteous to every single member of the bar. So one learnt a lot from Justice Krishna Iyer as to how to be a genius, how to be patient, and how at the same time to be unfailingly courteous when members of the bar address you. I still remember an interesting incident. Some lawyer was going on and on about, in a criminal case, about an alibi. And Justice Krishna politely said no once, no the second time. Finally looked at him and said, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Dismissed. Apart from this, I was very fortunate in that I was able to attend 3 mammoth cases in that 1 year before I went to Harvard. And I was able to see at very close quarters 5 of the giants of our profession. I was very fortunate that I was the only person briefed with the great Nani Palkhiwala in the first Minerva Mills case, which as all of you know, dealt with what was left of Mrs. Gandhi's amendment, the great 42nd amendment, namely Article 31C and 368, 4 and 5. The forensic brilliance that I saw in those, 25 days or so, I have never seen since. This man's greatness was that he spoke with extreme simplicity. Anybody could understand. His thoughts were exceptionally clear. And above all, he buttressed whatever he argued with example after example, to lead to the inexorable conclusion to which he was leading. I remember at one stage of the proceedings, Justice Untwalia, who was a little garrulous, kept on and on at him and kept saying, look, Mr. Palkhiwala, you are preaching capitalism. We have chosen the path of socialism. We heard him out and afterwards said, has your lordship quite finished? So Justice Untwalia said, yes. So he said, not even a lunatic, and he shouted the word so that everybody jumped, would ever dream of crossing the wall from West Berlin to East Berlin. Now, it was this kind of advocacy which one never ever saw. It was so effective, it was so brilliant. I was very fortunate to assist him in that case. And opposing us was none other than the learned Attorney General at that time, Lalnarayan Sinha, and the very young additional Solicitor General, Sri K.K. Venugopal. Now, I remember Venugopal's contribution to that case was that he painstakingly went through the entire gamut of acts of Parliament and segregated a whole number of them in order to point out that a very large number would be outside the ambit of 31C and that therefore Palkhiwala was painting a false picture. Fortunately for us, that painstaking research did not lead to a result in his favor, as a result of which basic structure got reinstated. 368, 4 and 5 were knocked down by all the judges, and 31C as amended knocked down by 4 out of 5 judges, Justice Bhagwati dissented. The other great matter which I attended was Swadeshi Cotton Mills versus the Union of India. At that time, my father was for the petitioner and Soli Sorabji, Solicitor General, was for the respondent, the union. And by a 2-1 verdict, my father succeeded. Section 18AA of the IDR Act, Industries Development Regulation Act, was the issue, and the actual issue was as to whether natural justice needed to be observed before management was taken over. 2 out of the 3 judges sided with my father. Justice Chinnappa Reddy dissented. And it was a very great victory for him. Ultimately, of course, it turned out to be Pyrrhic, because they said, notwithstanding that audi alteram partem had not been followed, yet they would give a post-decisional hearing under section 18 capital D. The third fantastic case was the celebrated Needle Industries case. And Needle Industries went through 2 sets of hearings. The first was before Justices Utwalia and Pathak, who differed. And at the second hearing, we had a high-power bench, Chief Justice Chandrachud, Justice Bhagwati and Justice Venkatramaiah. There again, my father showed his forensic brilliance. His opponent was the great Sirvai. Sirvai unfortunately floundered around because he had cataracts at that point of time and wasn't at his effective best. I'm told that my father's most outstanding abilities as an advocate were that he was able to divine the judge's mind and instantly, therefore, respond to the judge as he expected a response. So there we have 3 outstanding pillars of the advocates. 4, in fact, the young Venugopal as well. And as I told you, unfortunately, Mr. Sirvai, who was one of the greatest and most formidable in his day, was at that point of time not really up to it. After this great year, first year, I went to Harvard, studied at Harvard, practiced in New York, as you've been told, then went to the Bombay High Court and studied there and practiced there for about 3 years. And I came back in 1986 to join the chambers of K.K. Venugopal. K.K. Venugopal at that point had lost his wife and was in deep sorrow. He was a most devoted husband, father, and a most devoted senior. I cannot thank him enough. We learned so much with him. And the senior juniors at that point, that is C.S. Vaidyanathan and Krishna Mani, were both outstanding lawyers and outstanding individuals. They helped me a lot. I learned a lot in that chamber. And I was loath to leave it after about a year and a half. But I have maintained excellent relations with all 3 of them. As I have told you, I consider the learned Attorney General to be my guru for life. After leaving Sri Venugopal, I managed to develop a reasonable practice here. And now I come to the next great name in my career, Chief Justice Venkatachalya. It is he who picked me up at a very young age. And it is he who really propelled me into becoming what I became as a senior advocate, and albeit about 8 years before my time. I still remember in court number 3 at that point, he was heading a bench with Justice R.C. Patnaik, the judge who unfortunately got killed in an accident. And he had just decided that expenditure tax matter. expenditure tax went up from 10% to 20%. So there was another writ petition challenging the hike. My father led a battery of lawyers, me right at the end. And I recall my having really worked hard in order to show that Justice Venkatachalaya's judgment had a loophole in it. It was a constitution bench. And the loophole was that you can't pit a residuary entry against an entry in list 2 in the 7th schedule. You can only pit an entry with a subject matter, not an entry with no subject matter. And for that purpose, I remember, I had pulled out a passage in Lefroy's Canadian constitutional law. Fortunately for me, Justice Venkatachalaya had cited one para and missed the second, which had stated exactly this. So I showed all this to my father. Father got up. Venkatachalaya said, "What is this Nariman now? Is this covered?" My father looked around and said, "Yeah, it's covered." It was the end of it. Apparently, I showed great shock, and the learned judge saw it. He said nothing at that time, but I got a message at lunchtime that Justice Venkatachalaya is calling you back to court. Mind you, he called only me back. At 2 o'clock, he said, "Mr. Nariman, there was some discomfiture. What was the trouble? Was there something wrong?" So I said, in my usual, blasé fashion, I said, "Yes." So I said, "What was wrong? Are you telling us our judgment is not right?" I said, "Yes." So he looked at me and he said, "Tell us why it is not right." So I told him about Lefroy and the research I had done. He recalled the order and issued notice. Unimaginable. Huh? After he recalled the order and issued notice, he told me, "I'll be very interested in your research. You are to give me a written argument by yourself. I don't want it from anybody else. And I will then consider as to whether my judgment is or is not correct." Most unfortunately, 2 weeks later, Parliament retracted and 20% became 10%. There went my research, and there stands the judgment. After Chief Justice Venkatachalaya made me a senior way before my time, I appeared before a number of judges, some of whom were outstandingly good to me, some of whom were outstanding judges. Chief Justice Ahmadi, for example, was one of our most outstanding judges. He had somehow a practical common sense by which he would invariably arrive at the correct result. He was also an excellent hearer of counsel. He didn't allow too much leeway. At the same time, he didn't stop anybody short. And he gave the junior a little more leeway than the senior. So all these were important learning experiences for me. Justice Kuldeep Singh, another direct appointee from the bar, was a very dear friend. And though brusque, rough and difficult, he was also a very good judge. And again with a robust common sense, so that he arrived usually at the correct solution. I'll give you an instance of what happened in his court once. Vinod Bobde, my dearest friend at the bar, who I miss very, very much today, was opposing me in some water cess matter. And it was covered in my favor by a judgment of Justice Sabyasachi Mukherjee. The municipality wanted to question the correctness of that judgment. And Bhimrao Naik, who was a very dear friend also, appeared for the municipality together with Vinod. And Bhimrao Naik argued for around 45 minutes to an hour and didn't make any headway. At the end of that, Kuldeep Singh started his dictation. Vinod got up and said in his inimitable and very mild style, "Your Lordship, give me just 2 minutes. So Kuldeep Singh smiled at him and said, "Yes, Mr. Bobde, certainly." Bobde spoke sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, there was trouble. By sentence 4, big trouble. By sentence 5, all over. In 5 sentences, he demonstrated how Mukherjee's judgment was wrong And then came, yes, Mr. Nariman. And Mr. Nariman couldn't support. These are great memories of yesteryear. I can only tell you, I'm flooded with so many of them just now that I could go on and on. But let's fast forward a little. And now come to the stage at which I became Solicitor General. For this, I have Kapil Sibal alone to thank. Kapil was always partial to me, and somehow or the other braved the other elements in the Congress stronghold, including the then Attorney General. And finally, it was agreed that if they could find somebody better than me, they would take him. They didn't find somebody better, so I became Solicitor General. At this stage, I must also tell you that I really miss, like I miss Vinod today, my dearest friend Arun Jaitley. Arun again was such a darling of a human being. He was such a great man. And he was such a dignified lawyer. I don't think I've come across a more dignified advocate than him. I have seen his rise from zero. I have seen him as a Tisasari lawyer. I have seen him rush to get a senior when my father was not available in the Indian Express case here before Justice A.P. Sen. And I must tell you that as a lawyer, let alone as a minister and whatever he became later, he was always exceptionally well prepared and exceptionally dignified. He was outstanding. I also look back with the greatest love, if I may say so, to two of the early judges, Justices A.P. Sen and Justice Chinnappa Reddy, as you've just been told. Justice A.P. Sen, in fact, was like a father to me in court. He would poke fun at me. He would encourage me. And as he was about to retire, I appeared in some matter before him. I didn't have much of a role, so I said 2 sentences. At the end of 2 sentences, I sat down. Justice Sen then said, Mr. Nariman, don't you have something else to say? I said, no, my lord, I don't have much of a role here. He said, say something, say something. This is the last time I'm going to hear your voice in court. You know, he said it almost pathetically. And that evening, I got a phone call from him, in which he started out by saying, all roads lead to Rome. I said, I don't understand. He repeated it. Then he said, look, if anybody requires Western classical music in this city, he has to come to you. I love Western classical music. And because I love Western classical music, you will therefore dub cassettes for me. At this stage, the learned Chief Justice has to leave because he has to catch a flight. So I'll just wind up after 10 minutes. Thank you very much. So, Justice A.P. Sen then would insist on cassettes being sent to me. He would never accept a blank cassette from me. A blank cassette would be sent, I would have to dub whatever he wanted. And only then would he accept this gift from me. And this went on throughout his life because we kept up long after he retired as a judge. Justice Chinnappa Reddy also was a great mentor to me, indeed to all young people. And that's something I learned from both of them again. I remember I argued Prakash Amichan Shah before a constitution bench, being fielded by your veteran president, Mr. Praveen Parekh. Now, Praveen braved all odds to field an absolutely raw junior because the senior had suddenly disappeared from the scene. And the bench was an extremely difficult bench to deal with, particularly property rights. Chinnappa Reddy heading it, Justice Eraddi on one side, Justice Venkatramaya on one side, and then Justices R.B. Mishra and Justice Khalid. So anyway, he told the clients that, look, at this last minute, we cannot brief any senior. This boy is ready. I will risk him. So he risked me. And I got up and I remember I started off with a general sort of bhashan on property rights. All of them endured me for about an hour because they saw this young man, let's encourage him. And at the end of an hour, Justice Eraddi then asked me a question. It was a very tricky question. So I answered very cheekily saying, this is like, have you stopped beating your wife? If I say this, you will say this. If I say this, you will immediately berate me and say this. So everybody laughed. And they allowed me somehow or the other to carry on for about 2 whole days. And that experience, that very early experience and the confidence that it gave me, thanks to that bench, and thanks in particular to the presiding officer of that bench, Justice Chinnappa Reddy, again held me in very good stead, long, long afterwards. We now come to Chief Justice Lodha, who again did the greatest possible service to me by making me do a public service in turn. I remember he became Chief Justice and he insisted that I accept judgeship. He said, you accept it now. So I said, Chief, it's not possible to say now. He said, no, now. I'm not giving any opportunity to look back. I said, I need to consult my wife at least. He said, no, I'll deal with her. So I said, you don't know what a Parsi wife is. How can you deal with her? You don't have one. Then I said, what about my parents? So I said, no, I'll deal with your father. Don't worry. I said, my parents. I didn't say my father. So again, he said, no, I will not accept no. So finally, I said, all right, you give me till tomorrow morning. I promise you I'll come back. I consulted them. They all said, yes, why not? I mean, it's some new phase in your career. And I went back and said yes to him. And that's how by accident I became a judge. And these 7 years have been the most grueling, difficult years of my life. I can tell you, it is no cakewalk. When I was this side, I had no concept of what it was to be on the other side. Let me tell you. And now having been on both sides, this side is much, much more difficult. You have to read much more. In fact, on one of my very early, probably the second week of my judicial career, Mukul appeared, another good friend. And Mukul, as usual, had his 20 briefs or 25 briefs or whatever. And I said, Mr. Rohatgi, today I have beaten you hollow. To your 20 or 25, I have 65. I can't say that I've enjoyed every minute of being a judge. It's been very hard work. Certainly enjoyed writing judgments. But at the end of it all, it's worked out well. And coming back to what Vikas Singh was telling the Chief Justice, I also believe that nobody has any legitimate expectation to come to this court. Nobody. I believe there is a legitimate expectation in the people of India and the litigating public to get a certain quality of justice from this final court. For that, it is very clear merit must predominate, subject of course to other factors, but merit always comes first. And I would second Sri Vikas Singh in saying that it is time more direct appointees were elevated to this bench. I would also say and exhort those direct appointees who are asked never to say no. It is their solemn duty, having reaped so much from the profession, to give back. Very, very important. The time has now come for the vote of thanks. I have to thank everybody around me. I couldn't have functioned as a judge without help from every quarter. Above all, I have to thank Messrs. Chawla and Narula, my secretaries. I have to thank my entire staff. I have to thank the court staff, the court masters. I have to thank my law clerks, each of whom has had to suffer me for a year and more. And of course, I cannot end without thanking the one man who has been with me on all my campaigns, Narayan Verma, since 1989, and who will continue, I suppose, with me till he or I shuffle off this mortal coil. Thank you all very much. I will miss all of you. It's a very unreal thing not to be able to step in or not to step in now to this institution which I have belonged to for so many years. God bless the Supreme Court, now and always. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, my lord. You are most welcome whenever you want to come here, my lords. The whole bar is here. Now I'll read the message given by Honorable Justice Nariman to the members of the bar. I have been a member of this association for over 25 years and have great memories of the rough and tumble, literally speaking, of practice in this great institution. Having been on the bench for over 7 years now, I still do not feel that I have ever left the bar. My level of comfort with all the lawyers who ever appeared before me remains the same as it was when I was a member of this great bar. Having served this institution for over 35 years now, it is difficult for me to bid farewell. You will all be ever present in my heart and mind for the new chapter in my life which begins tomorrow. Justice R.F. Nariman. Thank you, my lord. Now to present a memento on behalf of the SCBA to Honorable Justice Nariman, I request Mr. Vikas Singh, President, Mr. Pradeep Rai, Vice President, and all the office bearers of SCBA to please join us. Aye. This. No, all the members, not office bearers, all the members. Let everyone come. Mahalakshmi ma'am, please come. Neena ma'am, please come. But did I say office bearer? Oh, I meant all the members. I'm sorry. Please come. May I now request Mr. Rahul Kaushik, Joint Secretary, to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the SCBA.
On behalf of Supreme Court Bar Association, we are extremely grateful to Honorable Mr. Justice N.V. Ramanna, Chief Justice of India, for presiding this function. He had to go somewhere urgently, so he had a flight to catch. We are extremely thankful to Honorable Mr. Justice R.F. Nariman for accepting our invitation. What to say about Justice Nariman? We all have people who have spent around 18-20 years in this profession. We have briefed sir, we have learnt a lot from sir. He was designated from Supreme Court at a very young age of 37, a Parsi priest at the age of 12. Briefing was not actually when you used to go and brief, it was not that we are going to tell him something new. It was all actually a test for us, how well we are prepared. Even if it was a 4-volume brief, he would straight away say, you come to volume 3, page this. So this is how it was with sir always. And as a journey of 7 years before the Supreme Court as a judge, again, Numerous judgments are as given, landmark judgments being constitution benches, other judgments, section 66A of IT Act, then disqualification matters that they have to be decided within a period of 3 months, that you have a term of 5 years at the most, right to privacy, and so many other judgments. Just to speak about Justice Nariman, I just want to say something, you know, he's so well read. The advantage of technology, even you have free time, you could just go on the internet, Google it, and you would find, you know, his judge, he would speaking on various points. I think it was somewhere in Bombay, sir was speaking on all the dissenting judgments of Supreme Court in 1950s and 60s. Justice Vivian Bose, Justice Subba Rao, then Justice Faisal Ali. Amazing. This is a learning experience for all the younger members of the bar. We wish to thank ma'am who is here, 2 daughters, to be part of this function. We are extremely thankful to all the honorable judges of the Supreme Court. We have Justice Lalit, Justice Nageshwar Rao, Justice Khanwilkar, Justice Gawai, Justice Balasubramaniam, Justice Nageshwar Rao, and Justice Rishikesh Roy. We would also like to thank Learned Attorney General who could not join us physically, but he joined us virtually. Also, Mr. Tushar Mehta, Learned Solicitor General of India, Additional Solicitor General, Mr. Jayan Sood, Mrs. Diwan, all the senior advocates, Mr. Dushyant Dave, past president, Mr. Parikh, past president, all the other senior advocates to be part of this function. We are also thankful to all the office bearers of SCORA and members of this bar to join us for this function. It just shows the popularity of Justice Nariman, because most of us have actually seen us this side also and that side of the bar also. And lastly, we would like to thank Secretary General, learned registrars, and members of the press for all their cooperation and for covering this function. And lastly, our executive committee members for all their background work to make this function a success. Kindly join us for tea. Thank you.
You remember you mentioned that day that your judgment is covered. You were right, I was wrong, I recall that.